This is section 4, lecture 5, the final lecture of this section. And here we're going to be talking about the alternatives to rational decision making that come from psychological influences on decision makers in foreign policy. The basis of these theories is to criticize the idea of rational decision making. Rational decision making is not necessarily possible due to several factors. Decision makers don't have complete information. Decision makers are biased, and the information that they receive from bureaucrats, from advisors, is also biased. Information is based on history and not necessarily pertaining directly to the foreign policy circumstance at hand. Also, personality plays a role in whether or not a leader can fully be abstract, be objective in their decision making, and it undermines that idea of rationality that a nation state in its decisions are unitary, that they are abstract, that they're thinking about the national interests only. One large study comes from a book by scholar Joseph de Riviera, The Psychological Dimension of Foreign Policy. And although this is a quite old text, it still is relevant based on the criticisms of the rational actor model. What we will see here over the next several slides are these points. Ultimately, leaders, foreign policy decision makers, cannot be objective. They cannot think in the abstract sense because the reality that they're seeing is not shaped solely on reality but by their perceptions. And so any foreign policy situation that they find themselves in, or crisis situation, or decision making situation, will be distorted based on their own pre-existing ideas. And thus, reality will be shaped by those perceptions. And their perceptions will become more important than looking objectively at the reality of a situation. De Riviera goes so far as to claim that reality can be changed due to perceptions, based on the idea of self-fulfilling prophecies. Part of this is explained by biases. Everyone has their own biases, whether they realize it or not. And these biases are based on an individual's background, their life experiences, their ideology, their religion, their education, so on and so forth. The fact that people don't necessarily admit to this or realize that they have biases would fall under this category called unmotivated bias. If you are a decision maker, your view of the world will correspond with your established belief systems. But established belief systems are going to be different from individual to individual in some cases. Definitely, established belief systems are going to be different across different cultures and educational perspectives and political ideologies and religions. And so the background of an individual decision maker puts a view of a prospective foreign policy situation into a light that they understand that perhaps is different, or a different perception of the same situation, than another person with a different background. And so your perception of a given situation based on these biases is going to color then the decisions that you make. It's going to lead you to adopt some information and reject other information, even though that information may be correct or neutral. It's going to lead you to favor one group over the other, perhaps, one policy over the other, so on and so forth. And an idea that goes along with people's unmotivated biases is selective perceptions. Here, if you're a decision maker and different advisors are coming to you with different information, different options to solve a problem, different views, whether there is a problem or not, the information that you accept will fit into your preconceived view of the world. What you're likely to accept as pieces of advice are going to already align with what you already believe. This is the idea of selective perception. You're going to accept or believe what reinforces what you already thought, and you're going to reject those things that disagree with your worldview, that challenge what you already thought. If we talk about this in the context of a failure of rationality, then you are not being objective as a decision maker. You're not really looking at the problem or the decision to be made from an abstract view. You are filtering out, perhaps, good opinions, good information, and leaving in bad opinions or bad information. And so this leads away from a fully fleshed out cost-benefit analysis that is key to the rational decision-making model. Another aspect of psychological influences that goes along with unmotivated biases and selective perceptions is the shadow of the past that was on the previous slide. And the use of analogies goes along with that idea, that your view of a current situation is influenced by the past, is influenced by another foreign policy situation that may be somewhat similar, but these things are never exact. And so then you will use an analogy in order to take a shortcut to a rational decision. And it goes like this. if situation A is like situation B, therefore situation B can be solved like situation A. This is a shortcut to rational decision making. You're not really giving the new situation its full due, its full consideration. You're not truly being objective. You're placing it in the context and the confines of a different situation. And so this leads away from a rational decision. Other ideas that go along with failures of rationality, unmotivated biases, and selective perception is the idea of cognitive closure. Here, the idea is that you reject new information and alternative views or opinions once a decision has been made. And so then, if you are seeing a foreign policy situation through your own lenses of unmotivated bias, from your own viewpoint, perhaps you've accepted information and opinions and advice that already fits your view of the world and reinforces what you thought about the situation, and new information comes along to contradict that. Cognitive closure will have us believe that you will reject that new information. You'll shut it out. Well, perhaps that information is good. Perhaps the new information will get you to change your mind. Perhaps it will get you to change your view of the situation. All of those things would be positive towards making a rational decision. But if you're closed off to that new information, this will lead you away from a rational decision. And part of cognitive closure goes in with this idea of bolstering. That if you have made a decision, you're going to stick to it. And if someone challenges that decision, you're going to double down. This is the idea of bolstering. Once a decision has been made, there is an effort to change your mind, you're not going to give in. In fact, you're going to rally people to support your side. And you may go so far as to present unfounded claims and outcomes in order to get people to support you. All of these features that we've mentioned over the previous slides represent shortcuts to rational decision making. A different view of a failure of rationality is not a bias based on the way you view the world in an unmotivated sense or an unrealized sense, but is seen in an idea called motivated bias. Why would a decision maker reject information that they know may be better or different? Why would they reject different pieces of advice that may lead to a decision that is in the national interest in a rational way? Well, because they have a favored policy or a personal desire to see that policy go through. So remember, with unmotivated bias, we said you see the world through these lenses of your own experiences, your own ideologies, your own religion, so on and so forth. Those things have influences on you, whether you realize it or not, and thus shape the way that you're going to view a situation. A motivated bias would be rejecting alternatives because you want to reinforce a most favored policy, want to serve a personal gain, And so you're rejecting any alternative views of the situation based not on these unrealized biases, but on very specific active biases. And so when a person wants to serve a personal gain, wants to serve a most favored policy of a nation state, they will downplay information that doesn't fit into the piece of advice or the option that they see as best, that would then have their most favored policy be accepted. They'll be hyper vigilant, reinforcing this policy over and over and over again. One of these ideas of serving most favored policies can go back to the idea that we discussed with bureaucracies reinforcing their standard operating procedures, putting them forward as the best policies or options to decision makers, regardless of whether or not they fulfill the goals to solve a certain situation.